Hey there, I'm Mr. K. If you're watching this video, you're maybe in my AP Lang class, and I gave you this video for homework, or you're watching it at the beginning of class, or whatever the case may be. Or since these are posted online, maybe I've never met you, and you're watching these to help you with AP Lang prep. So either way, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching the video. I hope it's helpful for you. Um, so this video, this is the first AP Lang lesson that CollegeBoard provides. It's where they want the class to kind of start, and the first topic for us to kind of look at. And it's easily the topic that makes the most sense to start with, because um, everything that we are going to look at this year builds off of this initial idea. Really, two ideas that we're going to talk about today. All right, so the whole idea of this video is right here: to identify and describe components of the rhetorical situation. And the focus is this lesson is an introduction to rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. So, just like, what are those two things? Right. And so today we don't get into using rhetoric or interpreting it or anything like that. We're just we're starting with some terms. We're defining our terms, and so it's pretty focused on those two things: rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. All right. So two goals. All right. Understand what rhetoric is. Understand the rhetorical situation. So by the end of this video, you should be able to do those things. Obviously, if you're in my class, I didn't mention this. Always email me with questions or ask me. In class. That's why I'm here. But if you are watching this online, you can always email me through YouTube, and like the email address on YouTube, and I'd be happy to help you. Okay, so let's get into it. Rhetoric has power. And I'm going to give you a definition of rhetoric, but I just want to give you some kind of background kind of context here for like why we study this. All right. So let's go back in time a bit. All right. Uh, Martin Luther King, right after his assassination. All right. There was rioting in over 100 cities in the United States. Right? Two major cities were not among them. So there were two major cities in the U.S. that did not have rioting: Memphis, Tennessee, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Right? So Memphis, Tennessee, that was where Martin Luther King had spoken just the day before his assassination on April 3rd, 1968. And Indianapolis, Indiana, that was where Robert Kennedy spoke on April 4th, 1968, upon hearing the news of King's assassination. So you have the day before the assassination and the day of the assassination. And two major speeches occur in each of those cities, right? To this day, many believe that this was due to the words spoken, and so many were listening, huge audiences. Right? And what were these two men, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, what were they speaking about? Nonviolence, right? Equality, justice, brotherhood, right? Brother and sisterhood, just caring for other people. And so these two speeches, many believe, and I tend to think it's true, that these two speeches, they without getting too kind of philosophical about it, it kind of cast a spell on the audience, right? You hear a great speech, and you think, I want love, I want equality, I want justice, I want fairness, I want nonviolence. And these two cities, among over 100 cities that were writing. These two cities did not. And so the idea here is rhetoric has power, right? It actually accomplishes things. And I like to start there, even just quickly start there, because we are preparing for an exam, right? There's no way around that. That's what we're doing. Like, I'm preparing my students for an exam, and I want them to pass, right? So it's not important, but let's not lose sight of why these skills are important just for being a human being. So rhetoric has power. Now, what is it? All right, like if we need a definition for this, and we're agreeing that it has power, what is it? Rhetoric is the study of effective, persuasive language use. All right, effective, persuasive language use. All right, I was just using rhetoric. I was trying to convince you that rhetoric has power and that it's important and it's worth studying. Right. So we are surrounded by persuasive language. We are um, uh, constantly bombarded by it. We use it constantly. We fall prey to it. It's everywhere, right? And it can be used for good, and it can be used for bad, right? So. I tell my students all the time, I think AP Lang, I teach Lang and Lit and Senior English. And I think those are the most important classes you can take. And Lang is not exempt from that. Understanding language and how it's used is vital. So that's what rhetoric is. All right, the study of effective persuasive language use. All right, now we've talked about this. Words have real power. We will be able to affect our world if we can, one, recognize that power, and two, wield that power. If we can use it. And I know we throw around the term, especially teachers. We are pretty guilty of throwing around language like, guys, you can change the world, you can affect the world, even though it's true. But even on a small scale, if I can persuade my daughter uh, not to get in a stranger's car, right? If I can just instill that lesson in her over time, I might save her life. You know what I mean? Or if I persuade my daughter to eat the broccoli that's on her plate, right? And small scale, big scale, it's still changing the world. It's still keeping her safe and helping her to eat healthier, right? So I know we throw around that term a lot, but it really does change the world. You can use language in a way that people will listen to you and think that person has something to say, and that person has something to offer, and I'm feeling persuaded. Right? And that's power. Okay, so that's where we start. Just what is rhetoric? I know I've talked about this. I kind of got ahead of myself, just talking about language and the empowerment that comes with it. But understanding rhetoric enables you to understand and participate in conversations about important issues in the world. So I won't get on my soapbox. Maybe I'll step on it for just a second, then I'll get back down. But if you're watching this video, at this point, that we are information and truth and morality. These things are in question intensely today. When I'm recording this video, it's July 15th, 2022. Right. So these things are under attack. They are being warped and mutated and evolving and changing, right? And so you being able to actually understand rhetoric helps you not only understand the information that's coming in, but for you to actually participate, right? Have some outward input to contribute to the conversation or to conversations about what's happening in this world. There's so much happening, right? So it gives you a voice, right? And these skills, they transfer to college, and I not only believe, I know for a fact they transfer to college and beyond. All right. But that's not to say the exam is just like, don't worry about the exam, guys. No, I mean, that's why you're here. I get it, right? I want you to get a 5, right? We can do this. But, past the exam, let's learn something that's actually beneficial, right? So, okay. So that's rhetoric. If I were to ask you right now, hey, what's rhetoric? Right? Think to yourself, just maybe pause the video for 10 seconds. Can you say that back? Can you answer that question just in conversation? Yeah, rhetoric is, right. If you can do that, cool. Skill 1, man. You're on your way. That's great. All right. Okay. Rhetorical situation. The second and last part of this video here. This, I would say, as an English teacher, this is one of the more important things that I actually teach. The great thing is it's really not hard to get kind of solid in your mind, right? But it's just such a helpful tool in figuring out what's being communicated and why. Right? So it's really, really a great thing. And you'll hear this term, rhetorical situation. Man, by the end of AP Lang, you will be like, please no more, rhetorical situation. I got it, right? So anyway, so we need to know what that is. Okay. There are different parts. I'm going to give you all of them, but let me just give you the kind of definitions of each one at a time and let it kind of get into your brain. All right. The rhetorical situation includes, starting with, the exigence. Exigence. Okay. That is the specific occasion or event that prompted the message to be spoken or written in the first place, right? Why is it that this speaker, this writer, sat down and started writing the words on the page, right? Or if it's just kind of an impromptu speech, what prompted them to walk up to the mic and just go? That's exigence, and that's actually really important and really fascinating to think about, right? A lot of times this is where something like satire kind of goes wrong, right? A piece of the rhetorical situation is misunderstood. People think that a comedian told a joke because what prompted them, what motivated them was hatred, when really, maybe the motivation was to make sense of, the thing that they were making the joke about, right? And so when you think of the exigence, the motivation, the intention, or the intent behind the speaker, you get some interesting conversations. Okay, so that's the exigence. The purpose, all right? Very close to exigence. And a lot of times when my students are working this out at the beginning of the year, the exigence and purpose get twisted up. All right, so purpose is why the speaker is conveying a message, right? That sounds exactly like exigence, right? Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say we're having a surprise party for my wife, all right? All our friends came over, and we walked. My wife Amy and I walked in the door, and she's surprised. And okay, fast forward 30-45 minutes, people are having food, having some drinks, chilling, having a good time, and I ding 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 ding, right? I uh, uh, kind of ring the glass, and I want to make just a quick speech about my wife, right? The exigence, right? The specific occasion or event is it's my wife's birthday, right? And what prompted me, still in the exigence, what prompted me to give this message is I love her and I care about her and I want other people to know that, right? That's what motivated me to hit the glass in the first place, right? Now, purpose. What is my purpose? My purpose is to celebrate her. My purpose is to make her feel good and make her feel valued and make her feel important and loved. My purpose is to maybe get someone in our friend group in the crowd there to chime in and say something as well, right? Purpose is more like tangibly, what am I trying to do now that I'm speaking, now that I'm writing? What am I tangibly trying to do? Exigence is like, what made me say, hey, hold that conversation, I want to make a quick speech? What made me go, hit the glass? So that's the way I try and tell my students is what made someone tap the glass with their knife and make the speech in the first place. Exigence and purpose. I promise the more you use those terms, you'll be able to kind of splice them apart. You really will. Audience, okay, who the writer is speaking to. I'm not gonna talk much about that. It's super important, but hopefully that makes sense to you. Who is being spoken to, right? And it's really interesting to look at audience, and you think you know who a speech was directed to, and then you really stop and do some research, and you think, oh no, that person was actually speaking to one specific person in the crowd, right? And that's why they spoke that way, or whatever. Okay, so the context, the circumstances surrounding the situation. That is stuff like the year, the date, the time, right? But it's also like what was happening in the world, what event, what what discussion was being had in the world. So I'm thinking, last year, and it's obviously it's still happening, but the news, it was flooded with Russia's attack on Ukraine, right? As it should have been. It's an important story, right? And so the context would have been, whatever the date was, you know, September. I don't know the exact date, so forgive me. September, 27th, 2021, right? When Russia was began fighting Ukraine, or whatever, right? So it's sort of like the date and time, but it's also like what was happening, right? Um, so the date when Roe v. Wade is overturned, and it's when and what's happening, right? The surrounding kind of details. The writer who's doing the writing, right? Pretty straightforward. Sometimes you get some interesting conversations there. Different levels of authorship and things like that. But really, it's who's doing the writing, and then your message, what the writer wants the audience to think or know, and or messages really. But when you take those pieces, right, those pieces right there, that allows you to fully understand a text and kind of its place in the world, right? That's the rhetorical situation. Okay. So just as a visual, if this doesn't help you, ignore it. That's fine. I find this helpful. But, we look at, this is Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. So he kind of came up with this kind of middle original idea, and then we've kind of finagled it and changed it over time a little bit. But so what we have here is our text. All right, I'm going to try and write with my mouse, so best of luck here. The text is this middle thing, that triangle. It's this thing that exists, right? And at the very core is what its purpose is, right? What is it trying to achieve? And then who the writer is, who the audience is, and what the message is form the three parts. It kind of shapes that text. The purpose, think of, let me take, I should have had an example ready, I'm sorry. But let's take, blank. This is a good AP Lang. Okay, Malcolm Gladwell. All right, he writes Blink. All right, so he is the writer. We can talk about who his audience is exactly and what his message is. Right, and those three things are going to shape the purpose. Now, if you change one of these aspects on the 3 points, the purpose is going to shift, and likewise, if you change the purpose, you know, the everything will shift. The message might shift depending on who you're talking to, right? But if Malcolm Gladwell hadn't written Blink, but someone else did, David Sedaris wrote Blink, all right, the message might be a little different. The audience might be a little different. The purpose might be a little different. Everything, it kind of shifts, right? And one piece of the rhetorical situation affects the other pieces, right? If you think of, if you are talking to your teacher about going off to college and what you're going to experience and what you're excited about, right? You're going to talk a different way than you do if your friend's like, hey, you excited for college? Right? You might talk about completely different things. You might talk about different parts of the college experience with your teacher than you would with your friend, and vice versa, right? So that's kind of the idea. That's the kind of that's how we kind of shape the rhetorical situation. Of course, the text sits within a context, right? And exigence being kind of the outer box. Basically, I put that meaning like this. It really kind of feeds into the rhetorical triangle as a whole. The exigence is the spark. Maybe I should have put like the exigence underneath, like fuel, and it fires up. I don't know, right? But the exigence is the genesis for the idea, right? So if that visual helps, great. If not, it's okay. But it's nice for me to kind of visualize it. And if I were doing a rhetorical analysis of some kind, or doing an activity like that in class, man, I might even jot that down on my paper real quick just to kind of get my mind on track. All right, so let's go back as we kind of finish up here. Let's go back to this Robert Kennedy speech. Remember, I said he heard the news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated, and he went out and he spoke. All right, so let's now apply that situation, that scenario, to the rhetorical situation. Okay, what was the exigence? Well, the assassination. That happened, and that motivated him. That gave the speech that Robert Kennedy gave. It brought it into being. It existed because the assassination. Right? Of course, I'm not glorifying the assassination by any means. I'm just saying it set the wheels in motion. Okay. What was the purpose? The purpose was to inform the crowd that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Right? He was, for many of them, I would say most of them, he was their first hearing of it. Right? He was informing them of this news, right? And to eulogize him, so to honor him after death, right? So he kind of had two purposes. Can you think how that might affect the language that Robert Kennedy used? Right? There are likely parts of this speech that are, maybe towards the beginning of the speech, they're a little more informative. Here's what happened. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Right? And then the eulogy is, I would imagine, much more emotional, much more like, what do we do now that this has happened? Right? Okay. Then we have our audience. It was residents of Indianapolis attending a political rally, right? And then the context was April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. assassination, Indianapolis, Indiana. Again, the date and time, the place, and what happened. It's kind of a mixture, right? Then our writer, you could put Robert Kennedy, sure, but it might help to put a little more kind of context behind who he was as a person. He was the Democratic presidential candidate. He was the brother of John F. Kennedy, who had also been assassinated. Can you imagine how that might change? That detail of his life as the writer might change how he speaks about Martin Luther King, who has now been assassinated. Right? So who the writer is matters a lot. And finally, our message, to remind this audience of King's message of peace and nonviolence. The day of his assassination, to say, we must remain peaceful. We must remain nonviolent. We should not act out in retaliation. Right? And this is someone whose, again, brother had been assassinated and was now dealing with the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And so for him to say, we need to remain peaceful, that holds power, right? His rhetoric, his persuasive language holds power. Okay. So here's the rhetorical situation one more time for you, what the exigence, the purpose, audience, context, writer, message is, right? And once you get those, again, you'll see those a bunch. We will be dealing with them constantly, but those 6 pieces make up kind of a text and its place in the world. Right. So today's goals were to understand what rhetoric is. Ask yourself if you do, right? And if you don't, shoot me an email, send me a question, or just kind of revisit this video or your notes or some other resource that's available to you, and to understand the rhetorical situation, right? And of these 2 goals, I would say obviously the second goal is the hardest, because there's like 6 parts of this thing you've never heard about, or like maybe never heard about, and so you have to kind of start figuring those out. All right, but those are the goals for today. So for next time, what we're going to do is we're going to understand how an audience relates to a rhetorical situation, right? So we're going to jump into the very specific part of the rhetorical situation, which is the audience, because the audience matters. The audience kind of changes everything. And so that's where we'll go next time. All right, my friends, thank you for being here, and I hope it was helpful. I'll see you soon.